For Meister Eckhart, God is hidden in the soul, in a hidden part of the soul, which he calls the soul's ground, Grund in German. Paradoxically, one must seek God nowhere, that is, not out there or in the created, but in this uncreated hidden part, since God is there hidden in the ground of the soul. It is in the negation of seeking God elsewhere that we become open to Him within us. Eckhart writes, "Truly you are the hidden God," Isaiah 45:15. In the ground of the soul, where God's ground and the soul's ground are one ground. The more one seeks you, the less one finds you. You should so seek Him that you find Him nowhere. The uncreated hidden part of the soul is also called the spark of the soul or the light of the soul. The metaphor of the light of the soul is at the center of Eckhart's theology and mysticism. It is a spark of the soul, a something, the innermost part, the fortress of the soul, the ground of the soul, a refuge of the spirit, a silence, a desert. These are the metaphors of what might be called an apophatic anthropology, as if to say that there is something unknowable about the self. The ascetical disposition of detachment and the ascetical practice of letting go constitute Eckhart's apophatic spirituality, of spiritual poverty. For Eckhart, the highest goal of the spiritual life is to become nothing and to become all. To become nothing in terms of creature in contradistinction with God. To become all in terms of being and existence in indistinction with God. That is, as God is in creature and as the creature is in God, one's true self. A person per se is nothing, and one's true essence is God's very own essence. Thus, for Eckhart, true spiritual poverty is to be nothing in order that God may be all. Eckhart is talking about living in the deepest sphere of life, which is beyond the level of the faculties of the soul. In other words, there is a place within the person which is beyond all that makes us creature, a place for God to work in. If we were to live and act out of that place, then life would not be about doing good or evil. It would not be about doing, but being. Letting go and letting God be God in you. Eckhart has a name for the place where God and spirit are one, and this is the ground of the soul. Grund is employed by Eckhart in a rich variety of ways, but the basic intention of the semantic field of ground language is always geared to one goal, achieving indistinct identity of God and human in what Eckhart calls the simple one. So he says there is a place in the soul which is uncreated and uncreatable. He writes, as the unmoved source of all movement, Grund, or ground of the soul, is the place from which the mystic must learn to live, act, and know. By becoming nothing in terms of self-created life, the soul's true identity is unveiled as an expression of God, and the soul is seen as indistinct from God, being an expression of His Word. Just as God knows God's self by the outpouring of self-expression, so the soul must participate in this, its ground, by a reciprocal ecstasy of the self, and that means leaving behind all possessions, desires, and aspirations which obscure the soul's mystical identity as a form of divine speech. In this mutual ecstasy, a true standing outside of self, the created distinction between God and the soul is overcome, and God is able to speak the soul as God's own word.